It is the right and responsibility of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children. Now, we commit that to memory at my school. It is not the school's responsibility to educate kids. It is the school's responsibility to assist families in educating their kids. And when you understand that dynamic and the importance of that fundamental truth about education, it changes the relationship between our institution and families, students, and the people who work there as well.
Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. You know him, you love him. He's not wearing any socks right now, which kind of scares me a little bit. Former Congressman Bob Schaffer. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks a lot, John.
And before we get into education policy, which is obviously your sweet spot, I don't like you too much, but I love your wife, who owns and operates Coyote Gold margaritas. So. Right. If you haven't tried them, you got to do so. So at least one person in your family is fun.
Yeah, doing something productive.
Doing something productive. Hey, for those who don't know, you've been on the state school board as well as being a United States congressman, but your real passion is education, and it's come alive in the last decade when you've built a charter school called Liberty Common. Tell me real quickly about Liberty Common. It is rated #1 in the state on academics. Obviously, I'm not going there. Tell me about it, and tell me about the passion that it took. You could have done a lot of different things. Running a school is very different.
Right. Yeah. Well, the school is over 25 years old, and we started it. It was one of the first charter schools in the state. I think it might have been 3 or 4 in origin. Right after the new charter school law was passed in 1994, but it was a kindergarten through 9th grade school, and in 2008, our board pondered the question of whether to add a high school to it, and so that's when I got involved. I had just run for the U.S. Senate, and I got beat, and so right after that defeat, the board called and said, "Hey, would you have any interest in spearheading a project of adding a high school to our school?" And so I signed up to do that, thinking it was going to be short term, just get the high school up and running and hand it off to some education experts. And,
I thought my job at Independence Institute was going to be like a year and a half too. So, but
and then getting a high school started means staffing it up. So I started, was involved in hiring the instructors, and a few months into that, the board said, "Why don't we make you principal and you be the principal?" So I did that for a few years, and just.
But you didn't have to. You didn't have to. You love doing this. I've talked to you about it. I see it in your eyes when we talk about it. What is it about this gig that revs your engine so much? And by the way, I've met a lot of your students as well, and they are exceptional people. We've talked. They've come down here. They're bright, and they have a civic mindset that is amazing for high schoolers.
Well, you mentioned my political history. So I've been involved in school choice debates and education policy. I mean, 9 years in the state Senate, 6 years in Washington, 7 years on the State Board of Education. And so I've been involved in a lot of policy discussions, and sometimes it's just theoretical, right? And school choice ought to work, right? Or that if parents are empowered, the school should be better. If you have choice within a marketplace, people should find the place where they thrive the best. These are nice theories, and in practice they generally work. But all of a sudden I had this opportunity to go from years and years of talking about school policy from in the public square of legislative bodies to actually doing it. And so being able to be part of an organization where all of these things can be proven to work, and not only just work, but to thrive. It's exciting
to see the results.
Yeah,
and it's one thing when you're a lawmaker and you put these things into place, and maybe you get a sense of what happens years later. But you've seen your graduates go out into the world. You've stayed in contact, I imagine, with some of them.
Right.
That's got to be rewarding.
Yeah, had a house full of them this weekend. They were. My daughter is an alumni. She was back home, and all of her classmates were over at our house, and it was fun. Great success. They're going to medical school. They're engineers, and just you're in a school.
So what's different about the school? Real
people,
fast. So. What is different about Liberty Common?
First, you choose to be there. It's a rigorous school. It is a serious academic school. It's classical in orientation. We don't we're not in the business of job training. The purpose of the school is to empower young people with useful knowledge about history, economics, math, science, of course, great literature. It is classical in nature, meaning that we care about the kinds of humans that these young people become. And yes, that's something to get excited
it's a tough
about.
School too.
It is difficult, without a doubt. So the point is there is some self-selection. The only students who come to the school are the ones who are serious about learning and who have the aptitude to learn quite a lot. So I tend to, it's not that all the discipline problems in public education go somewhere else. You just have fewer of them when children want to be part of your school.
Do you only take spectacular students?
No.
Because people think
that's against the law.
People think that public charter schools, and your school is public. It's not private. People still get that all messed up. That if my kid wants to go there and his grades aren't as good, that Bob Schaffer can go, sorry, man, but your kid is just not our kind of, he's not our type.
That doesn't happen in my charter school. It doesn't happen in any charter schools. It's against the law. There is actually a federal law that prohibits that.
I don't have a feeling at your school they all wear blue blazers with some big emblem over here and go yachting on the weekends.
Maybe someday, but right now we have a dress code, and it's business casual, simply. But no, they're not walking around in blazers with emblems on.
You must be satisfied. I mean, to see the school ranked year in and year out, in the top 2-3 schools, it's got to feel great.
Yeah, and we are very open about, at least I am, as the headmaster of the school, about look, the mind creates wealth, and learning a lot, being knowledgeable creates value for students, and universities actually pay by way of scholarships, and different organizations pay students by way of scholarships to get them into their colleges and their universities. And so I'm really proud of how we've been able to monetize knowledge, virtue, and character so that our students tend to go to college free or at reduced cost as a result of their talents. Right, absolutely.
All right, let's bring it to the crisis, and I do mean crisis right now. Let me explain my personal situation with all these lockdowns and online learning. So I have a son who's 16. He has Down syndrome. Mentally he might be 6. I don't know. He can't speak very well. He can't read or write. He needs help in the toilet. But he thrives and learns when he's in a classroom atmosphere. He learns from his peers, both typical kids and special needs kids. I have seen him come alive in these classes, and he advances. I can see that. When COVID came and they shut down the classes, his learning stopped. We can put him in front of the screen, but he needs physical therapy, he needs occupational therapy, he needs speech therapy, and most important, he needs to be able to intermingle with people. That's how he learns. So understand it, it's COVID. And then along comes this long summer when they could prepare for this, and still we're back to online learning, which is no learning whatsoever for my son.
Yeah.
I am more heartbroken than I am livid, and I am so damn livid you can't believe it, that I'm still paying taxes. My taxes haven't gone down, but my son is not getting these core governmental services in which he's entitled. Furthermore, he has what's known as an IEP, an individualized education plan, which is not being fulfilled. So I need to talk to lawyers now. I need to think about different things. Give me the money and let me bring him to a private institution. Let me bring him someplace where this moment of his life doesn't destroy his whole life. We don't get this time back.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you guys are handling this shutdown, what people's choices are, and am I in a unique situation?
No, unfortunately, you're not in a unique situation. I'll start there because your son's situation may be exacerbated to some degree based on the severity of his disability. And in that regard, you might have a civil rights claim that could be filed on his behalf. But to the extent that that's true for your son, it's also true to some extent for every child who is not in class today as a result of their schools being shut down. there are online schools that are designed to be online, and they might fulfill the needs of some households and some families and some students. But taking a school and a curriculum that is designed to take place inside a brick and mortar school building and trying to just deliver that through remote access over a camera, there's no scenario where that is superior to being with a teacher, being with other students. Education, sure.
You say that with clarity.
Yes.
How do you back that up? And I understand my daughter has taken online classes that are designed online, and they're been very rigorous. And now she has to take these in-person classes that are online, and they're worthless. So, I mean, I agree with you, but how would you prove that that brick and mortar experience doesn't come through that little camera on the teacher's laptop?
First, let me say, there may be examples where a regular classroom teacher is given the challenge of teaching his or her classroom through a camera and does a fine job. That has to occur. There's got to be some number in the sample, probably small, where kids are not missing a beat, but that's not the norm. And the reason I say this with such clarity is not because I have some recent study or facts or research analysis at the tips of my fingers, but this business of transferring knowledge from one generation to the next is not a new phenomenon. Adults have been educating children formally for 3,000 years, and there are lessons that professional educators should learn on the road to becoming classroom instructors, and that is that there are techniques, delivery systems, there are classroom strategies, there is the curriculum itself that has been perfected over the years, and none of this involves remote learning. The interaction between a teacher and a student is more than just passing facts back and forth, memorizing something, and regurgitating it. True education is an emotional exchange. It is an emotional exchange over certain topics, but there's also virtue and morality that is exchanged through the presentation of great literature, of great stories, of historical events that are explained and presented in a proper way, and that emotional exchange between an instructor and a student is the most powerfully delivered in person. When you can see the facial expressions, where you can read, where a teacher can see on a student's face confusion and respond to it in real time, right at that moment. That is when you hear about teachers who are teaching and they see the light bulb go off, as they say. That only happens when you're right there and you're capable of delivering that kind of education. And your child and children across the country right now are becoming academic casualties as a result of being denied that kind of interaction with the teacher that their parents have paid for already. And in the public school system, they've accepted the cash and they're spending it. There is the economic exchange that presumes this high quality education, the best quality education, is going to take place. And right now, there's a lot of taxation without education, and that's a crime. It's a crime for your child. It's a crime for the vast majority of American children. And there are widespread academic casualties that are occurring across the land. You only get to be a third grader once. The lessons for third graders are age appropriate. They're intended for a child at that particular age level. And if you delay it, it's not that you're just delaying the material, you're delaying the moment. You'll never capture that moment where that great education at the appropriate level can take place. You
mentioned the connection between student and teacher, that emotional connection, the nonverbal cues, and 80% of communication is nonverbal, so I'm told. Let me add another dimension to it, because you're talking about good kids. Now, when I talk about me as a student, the education was being around my peers as well. The experience of learning how to interact with other people, what's correct, what's not correct, doing things you shouldn't be doing and getting caught, doing things you shouldn't be doing and not getting caught. The whole experience of school also is an education. And being stuck in my house with me as the teacher, not only is my son Chance being robbed of any education he can't get back, but also his parents now need to take turns not going to work, getting robbed of money. So not only are we making less money, not educating them, but our money that we are spending in taxes isn't going to education. It's a double whammy. But I'd also add, education is the interaction between those kids. And that's what my son is missing the most.
Sure. Well, there's some acculturation that takes place in a school. There is some academic growth referencing that takes place among children. They know even among themselves whether they're keeping up or falling behind, and there's some encouragement that goes along with that as well. And to the extent that schools play a role in helping to shape the moral development and virtue development of children, if they're learning it all together, well, they absolutely, they're learning from one another, they're learning from each other's failures and celebrating each other's successes as well. But to this point about the economic disruption that goes along with that, look, if this were any other industry, you would get your money back and you would be able to take the savings or the refund and reapply it in some way that to you makes sense. And that's the second part of the crime that is taking place is look, government continues to take your cash. It continues to appropriate it as though education is taking place, yet everyone acknowledges it isn't in most cases. And yet but there's no compensation for the lack of, or for the failure of the product to be delivered. It's a shame. My school's in session, by the way. We're in our second week now of in-class learning, and what I just described is part of the motivating factor of our board, our parents, and the people who work in the school, that we feel a duty to deliver the product we're paid to deliver.
Let me go the other way. What you're doing is killing people. And I understand the argument that's going on, which is, hey, we want to keep people safe. Our job is to keep children safe. And of course, statistically, children are the safest category there are. In fact, more kids are dying by the regular flu than by COVID. All right, that's not the point, I'm told. The point is, those kids are going to be exposed, they're going to bring it home to grandma. Or the teachers could be exposed and bring it home to somebody who is vulnerable at their home. Therefore, we need to do this because we want to stop the spread. Now, mind you, the same thing happens to the checkout girl at my King Soopers, but her union isn't as good as the teachers' union. She has to show up for her job without those protections. Teachers are saying no. The governor has said if you feel vulnerable and you're a teacher, you don't have to go in. If you are vulnerable yourself or living with somebody, I'm not aware of any way to verify that. I don't know that anybody's auditing that. I do know that in Boulder Valley School District, about 300 teachers say, I don't want to teach. At which point I'm saying, great, give me the money and let me hire somebody who will teach my kid.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me about what's your reaction when I say what you're doing at Liberty is you're putting people in danger?
Well,
and,
of course. Yeah.
And if I'm successful and Boulder Valley opens up school again, I'm pushing for people to be in danger. Why are you killing people, Bob?
Well, if that were true, we wouldn't be doing it, obviously. We also have the advantage of public health officers in our county who we are in weekly communication with, who have supervised and guided and looked at all the precautions we are taking within the school. And so we're working right alongside public health professionals who, if they thought there was some risk to public health, they hold our certificate of occupancy. They wouldn't allow us to educate in schools, but they're not suggesting we shut down. In fact, they support our school being open and have, at least the officers in Larimer County, are of the opinion that children should be in schools, that this is on balance better for them. So we take that advice pretty seriously. But secondly, two things. Is any school safe? Is the studio safe? Is this building safe? And the answer is no. It's relatively safe. I came down a staircase. I could have tripped down it. I drove an hour to get here. I could have gotten an accident. There are certain risks we take to do anything that is worthwhile and important. And every individual is capable of balancing the tolerance for risk versus the reward for what is achieved, in the case of a school, by the learning that takes place. No parent at my school is forced to send their kids to the school. They do it voluntarily, and they've calculated that risk. We do have a camera in every classroom, so about 4 or 5% of the families at our school have their children watching classrooms from home. That's an option that they have.
Tell me about that, because you're telling me that your kids, if their parents feel uncomfortable and they don't want to expose them, they can still have an online learning experience.
About 5 or 6.
How's that working?
It's not the equivalent. It's those parents need to facilitate, support, and supervise those lessons to reinforce what is being learned in a classroom. But the most important parts of an education delivery, pedagogy in a classroom, take place in the classroom. You miss that when you're online. But again, we don't want to set the risk tolerance for every family. It's up to them. So we have options. The vast majority, as I say, about 95%, are sending their kids to school at my school, but we made the online option or the virtual option.
What about your teachers? Do you have teachers who go, I've got somebody, I mean, my folks are in their mid-80s. I worry about them. We made the decision as best we can not to visit them during this time. They're in a very different risk category, and it really hurts me not to spend time with them in person. If I were one of your teachers, but my mom was living with me, I might feel differently about coming
John,
into school.
At my school, we educate about 1,200 kids. We've got about 100 teachers and teacher assistants. If any of them came and said, I don't feel comfortable being here because there's some exaggerated health risk at home, we would cooperate with them to accommodate that, to deal with that. We'd find an alternative job for them to do from remotely, perhaps. But I really answered, my organization was prepared for this crisis over the last 12 years as we make hiring decisions. And look, we hire instructors who want to teach, who love teaching, who have the same enthusiasm I do. Most of our instructors send their kids to my school. That's one of the advantages you can have at a great charter school. And so they are totally bought in to the most important thing, which is educating children. And so, sure, look, in any given year, we've got a risk of the flu, we've got the risk of colds, we've got the risk of whatever's circulating and whatever germs kids are passing to one another. Is the concern for this one elevated slightly? Maybe. Among children, doesn't seem to be so. But on the off chance that a child can pass a germ onto the virus onto an adult, that's somewhat of a risk. We've taken precautions in the school as well. Our kids have the wraparound desk masks when they're in their chairs. They're wearing the face mask when they're going around.
What is a desk mask?
It's a polycarbon shield. That
really? Are they in like
270?
Little, so they're like in little
fish tanks.
Cones of silence, and get smart cones of silence on their desk.
We spent over $100,000 installing 3-sided fish tanks on every desk in the school.
You're kidding me!
No.
Oh, that's got to.
We overhauled the air handling system. We have hospital surgery room quality air in our buildings. We changed the schedules a little bit to allow some more time for passing periods so that the hallways could be less condensed. Change the patterns of students moving throughout the school. We're maintaining cohorts in our youngest grades so they don't all eat lunch together. Your class eats lunch with your class. Same with out on recess.
I feel so sorry for these kids.
Well, we had to go through all of these things in order to make every reasonable effort to...
Reasonable? You stuck your kids in aquariums. That's more...
Seems like it.
That's unreasonable.
They're wraparound desk masks.
I'm sorry, wraparound desk masks. Yeah, let me ask you about the governor. And you served with him on the state ed board for many years, and we both know him pretty well.
Yeah.
He's the one that put out this executive order that said if a teacher feels that they are in a vulnerable situation, they don't have to do it. I understand with Liberty Common, you've got passionate teachers and passionate parents who are all there by choice. I'm sure your teachers could be making more money someplace else as well. But that's not the case in my school. That's not the case in most schools. So Boulder Valley has 300 teachers who say no, yet the people who serve us food and take care of our groceries, they have to do it. Why is that more essential than my kid's education? Do you put the onus on the governor for putting out this executive order excusing teachers from doing their job?
That's an interesting question. There are a separate set of facts in public education that make the question hard to answer, and that is the real issue is the devastating effect of teacher unions on the quality of education, not only in this state, but throughout the country. They have converted institutions that were intended to be about educating and improving the lives of young Coloradans. They've converted these institutions to institutions that are now unionized, where the predominance of decisions are driven by what is in the best interest of the employees. And so that's why the executive order, look, every employee should be working in these schools because they want to be there. It should be a voluntary exchange. They should have a individual relationship with their school district so that these questions could be evaluated on an individual basis. Because there are some remarkable, unique situations where it may make sense for a teacher to not be in the classroom. But if you've got to treat all teachers the same because the union insists upon it, then an executive order that treats all teachers the same becomes problematic in a certain number of cases. And it ends up excusing the bad teacher who just decides, why should I work today? The governor's given me clearance. All I got to do is call my principal and say I don't want to. I have some fear, and I get to go home. And that teacher's
the teacher
protected.
who's listening to us right now would probably say, "Look at these two jackasses. They don't know. I'm still working even harder now because I've got to do it at home. I'm not working. It is more difficult for me to do it on my laptop, but I care about my kids." To me, I say, you don't care about my kid, otherwise he'd have in-person learning.
Again, the issue is whether we can evaluate through a scenario a teacher as an individual professional, and when they are when their union succeeds, first in unionizing a district, second, negotiating with a school board through a master agreement where all teachers are treated the same, where the worst teacher in a district is paid the same as the best teacher in a district. Once that is done, then it removes the administrative ability to judge an individual case based on that individual's merits. I think that there are many teachers in Colorado, throughout the country, who are taking advantage of a crisis to do less work. There are many who are working vigilantly through it. The tragedy is, it doesn't matter in a regular public school. There's no principal who can sit down and say, this one's doing it really well, that one's slacking, this one is putting in heroic effort. They're not allowed to evaluate teachers on that basis. The rubric is created by the union, and evaluating a professional on a professional basis is not allowed to occur.
For those who might not be following, when you say rubric, you mean rubric.
Yeah.
And that in a teacher's union contract, the salary schedule basically has a graph with two lines. One has how many years you've worked, and the other one has how many different degrees or programs you've been certified for. So you get paid for the longer you've been in the job and more classes that you've taken. There's nothing there that judges you on your success with students. And nothing that judges you on how well you've changed kids' lives. Your only motivation is to stay in a job you hate longer and to go out and get those continuing education credits, because when you do that, your salary bumps up. So that's the rubric.
Yeah, and that's a big difference between my school and as a charter school. We have no union. Every contract I have with an individual teacher is individually set and negotiated based on their prior performance. That determines their pay raise for the next year, or sometimes a reduction just based on
What do you say
performance.
when people say, but teaching, you can't evaluate teaching? I mean, mind you, we evaluate every other person in every private sector job, from baseball pitchers to computer programmers to guys who dig holes. But in this, we're only as good as teachers as the kids that come through our door, and we don't have much control over that. It's not fair to judge us by that outcome.
Yeah.
There's so much that we can't control as teachers.
Any teacher who claims that they are not in control of the learning that takes place in their classroom should not be a teacher. That is just the antithesis of what professionalism is. Taking control of your circumstances, applying your professional skills, ability, background knowledge, and talents, and improving a situation not only for your organization but for the clients who walk in the front door. If on day one you come to the conclusion that none of that is possible, that's somebody who shouldn't be in the education business anymore. And look, I get it. I understand. I've heard the argument for years and years that when I and my administrative team at my school evaluate our instructors, we're doing that over the course of a year, and it is not objective. It is subjective. We are making professional evaluations about that instructor, whether they're doing the kind of job we expect in our classroom. There's some objective data too, but it's primarily the judgment of the academic leaders of the school. And look, if we were doing a poor job of that, if we were treating people unfairly, my teachers would be leaving. But they don't. They stay. They're energized. They want to do better the next year because they know if they achieve their expectations or exceed them, they're going to get more pay for that value that they've added to the organization. If you take away all that ability to act like a real professional in a public school, which is what occurs in most public schools, then you lose a hunger, an appetite, a love for quality education and really improving the lives of young people.
All right, let's finish up on this. Yeah, you like your students.
Love them.
Whatever.
Yeah.
My kid is what's important. Your kid's, my kid is important.
I agree with that.
Give me some advice. Give me some advice on what I should be doing.
Well,
because I am at a loss here. I'm at a loss as to what I should be doing. If I had money, I would pull that kid out and I would put him in some school that would help him. That's a difficult thing to do, and anybody who has money, they're okay. They can find, or they can hire teachers to come in and teach their kids in their house. First of all, you got to tell me about this DPS memorandum. You told me about it before the show, but tell me this, because this is just scary.
So just like a week or so ago, I read the news articles about a problem that the Denver Public School Board voted on unanimously, a solution, and it was a resolution, I think, and a letter or some communication that went out to parents, dealing with this with this phenomenon called education pods. So during these COVID shutdowns, while kids are at home, parents are taking it upon themselves to organically organize their friends and classroom peers to form pods where they meet together to reinforce what they're trying to learn remotely, and they are sometimes hiring tutors or substitute teachers that they persuade to become tutors for these pods that are occurring in neighborhoods and households. And this is popping up all around Colorado, all around the country, this whole concept of academic pods. So DPS sees this as a problem and issued this communication, this letter. They voted on it unanimously that pods are counterproductive to the education process because some students are going to see an academic advantage if their parents can organize a pod versus others who don't organize it or maybe can't afford it, and that it expands the learning gap between haves and have-nots, let's say, or activists and people who lack activism in their child's education. And DPS sent out this message. Please, if you love your child, if you love education, if you support the school district, don't get involved in these education pods. And for God's sake, don't hire anybody who works for DPS to be your tutor. And
I've got a solution for that, which is...
the arrogance of it, yeah. So,
well, the solution's pretty simple, which is they're absolutely right. If somebody with money brings together a pod and hires somebody to help their kids, and those who don't have money can't do that, there's a simple solution. You give money to the people who can't do this. I look at my situation with my child. My son is getting zero bupkis when it comes to education. Give me the money.
So
give me the money, and these people in DPS should get the same thing. Give them the money and let them save their children.
When you said earlier that you don't have the money for private education or other things, the fact is you do, It is, however, you've given the district, your school district, the ability to spend your money on you. And when you do that, there's no motivation to care about either the cost or the quality by the district. They're not mean people think, how can we really, pull one over on the Caldara family? They don't think in sinister terms like that. But on a systemic bureaucratic basis, there's no motivation for anyone to care about the cost or the quality when it comes to your child. But they've got your money. And so in terms of a way forward, and that's true for every other family in Colorado, by the way, our government is spending on an average child somewhere around $8,000 per child, which families should be, if schools cannot open to do the job, you should get your $8,000 somewhere else. When it comes to your child with a disability, it's probably close to maybe $15,000 or $20,000.
Oh, it's much more than that for my child.
And
but you're wrong on your number, because you're taking what's known as the PPOR, the per pupil operating ratio.
You're right.
You go to DPS, and if you took their entire budget and divided it by their students, you would find that it is $18,000, $19,000, close to $20,000 per student.
I know you're right. Yeah.
Could you say that a little louder? I didn't know.
No, I know you're right. It's federal funds, mill levy override, other grants, and so on.
All the bonds that they pay off, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So they are spending close to $20,000 on your typical kid. On my special needs kid, they could be spending 30 or 40. Okay, now, if you go to Florida, where they have scholarships for kids like mine, you can take that $30,000 and go someplace that services that kid.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
No.
That's the robbery, and my son is paying the price. And maybe online learning works for other people. I guarantee you it doesn't work for my son, and I guarantee you there's a whole class of people like my son who are being lost in this. And it's not just an oversight. It is cruelty. It is absolute cruelty what the state and what these school districts are doing to these kids. Yeah. It needs to end. And those people who don't have sympathy for these kids, I don't understand. Yeah.
Here's the universal truth of public education. It is the right and responsibility of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children. Now, we commit that to memory at my school. It is not the school's responsibility to educate kids. It is the school's responsibility to assist families in educating their kids. And when you understand that dynamic and the importance of that fundamental truth about education, it changes the relationship between our institution and families, students, and the people who work there as well. And so as far as some answers, one, we need to, now when everybody hears those words, they agree with it, but most people really don't. It is the right and responsibility of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children. School districts don't really believe that. Public school organizations don't believe that. Unions do not believe this. Most of our legislators do not really believe that, even though they think they want to. And if they did believe that, then they would be pursuing solutions right now at this remarkable, extraordinary, unfortunate time in public education to empower parents with the resources they're already paying to find solutions for their own kids. And so as taxpayers and citizens and activists, one, we need to be involved in the public square, starting with public education issues. We should be throwing out school board members who refuse to make students the highest priority, and they're not the highest priority right now during COVID time. We can see this throughout the state generally. There are some schools like mine where they still are. And,
look at that! Yeah. That smile on your face during that one.
Well, I got to tell you, our enrollment. We've got a lottery list. There are 1,200 kids in the school. There are about 1,500 now waiting to get in.
Oh, stop. You have more people on your waiting list to get into your school than you have in your school.
And about a month ago,
even if you double the size of everything, double the size of the school, the staff, everything, there would still be people on a waiting list to get in.
A brand new charter school, Ascent Classical in Fort Collins, just opened up this year, full in year one. I think their first day is coming up on next Monday. But then, private schools are experiencing enrollment growth. A month ago, when our district announced that it was going to shut its buildings down and teach remotely, our registration on our lottery waiting list just started cranking up every day. We were just getting 5, 10 a day that were enrolling to try to get their kids in our school.
Let me leave it at this. you might know this kind of instinctively, but let me articulate it. What you are doing, what the classical academies are doing, including Golden View and now up in Fort Collins, is dangerous. It's dangerous as hell. And there's no question why charter schools, public charter schools, are under attack. Because what you have done is you have shown a difference. You have shown something that is completely different, and the success of it proves a different way is possible. When somebody does one thing, when one guy can do something, it breaks the mindset. My favorite story is the guy who ran the 4-minute mile. That when we were kids, it was a impossibility. Some said it's a physical impossibility. Physics will not let anybody run. But when I did run a 4-minute mile, now the guy who ran a 4-minute mile the first time, 3 of the guys who were following him also broke a 4-minute mile on the same race. And what schools like yours do is they run a 4-minute mile and they prove what is possible. And for the educratic establishment who lives in this Borg-like facility of one size fits everybody, we must do it this way, yours could cause a contagion. And you know this. And that's why the war on public charter schools is emotional and heavy and ugly, because what you do is a danger.
And the interesting thing about it, John, is what we do is not remarkable. I like to tell people when they come in and they see the high test scores and the behavior on display in the school.
And I know where you're going with this. You say, yeah, because we help them cheat.
Yeah, right. No, not at all. No, the answer is we're not doing anything that's innovative here. I mean, this process of education really is 3,000 years old. There are lessons that have been learned going all the way back to Socrates, right? And so to the extent that we can just apply common sense, use the best lessons that have worked, the best strategies, the best techniques that constantly provide positive results, and we just do that and apply common sense to it, we run one of the best schools in Colorado, if not the best school in Colorado. And it's not remarkable innovation. It's freedom that is allowed to take place and allowed to work. Freedom of choice for students and families, freedom for educators to be legitimate professionals, and freedom for that whole environment to even exist in the first place. And students who are energized because they see where this freedom leads them, and giving them opening great doors for them for prosperity and wonderful futures. And it's this is not magic. It's not rocket science. It's not hard. It really isn't. It's just common sense. Where it's allowed to thrive, freedom creates prosperity and creates liberty. That's why we named the school that.
And as you know, when my Scotch glass is empty, this program is over. Hey, Bob, thank you so much, and thank you for all you do, and thanks for showing that there's a different way. I really do appreciate it. So keep on keeping on. Check out the Independence Institute at thinkfreedom.org. If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.